Chapter 851, Dwayne Dantès' New Business. Leonard stared intently at the portrait of Sherlock Moriarty. His brain had just imagined what the latter would look like without glasses or a beard. Although this could be quite different from the actual situation and was more of a product of imagination, Leonard increasingly found Sherlock Moriarty very familiar, as though he had known him before.
How is that possible? He's long dead, and I buried him with my own hands.
Leonard couldn't help but shake his head as he muttered with a scoff. Just as he said that, his expression froze because the person in his memories held a huge secret. This person had strangely escaped the influence of 2049 without the help of others. This person used 2049's uniqueness to finish off a Sequence 7 Beyonder, and back then, he was only a seer who isn't good at combat. This person had managed to summarize the acting method within a very short amount of time, and he had advanced to Sequence 8 at an extraordinary pace. This person possessed a high Sequence Sun domain charm and had used it with Captain Dunn Smith, who wielded a saint's ashes, successfully finishing off Megosi, who was pregnant, with an evil god spawn. This person's Sequence 8 Beyonder characteristic had been taken away by Ince Zangwill, but Captain Dunn Smith's Sequence 7 Beyonder characteristic was left behind. Perhaps it wasn't because Ince Zangwill had taken away the Beyonder characteristic which had appeared, causing it to be missing from the scene, but that it had never formed to begin with. Leonard Mitchell suddenly jolted to his senses as he observed Sherlock Moriarty's portrait again. 10 seconds later, he squeezed the words through his clenched teeth.
Klein Moretti.
He found that the mysterious detective, Sherlock Moriarty, looked more and more like his former teammate, the hero who saved Tingen, Klein Moretti. And this was under the scenario of him being without the clear discrepancies of glasses and a beard. Leonard's had fingers clenched tightly at some point in time as his joints suffused with a whiteness. After a moment, he let out a clear pant as he picked up Sherlock Moriarty's dossier again. This time, he flipped with a target in mind, roughly to the time when Sherlock first appeared in Backland early September. And this wasn't long after Klein Moretti had been buried. Leonard Mitchell's green eyes turned dark as he instinctively flipped through the dossier. Then he saw a name, Lenevis. This was one of the masterminds behind the evil god's descent in Tingen City. He was one of the main murderers who led to the death of Dunn Smith and Klein Moretti and the other Nighthawks. And Sherlock Moriarty's second record in Backland was his investigations at the dock for a serial murder, thus bumping into the disguised Lenevis. After this, the true creator's plan of descending was foiled, and Lenevis died in the sewers. His body was scattered with tarot cards, making it identical in style to the subsequent hero bandit Black Emperor. He didn't forget the harm that swindler brought. Leonard whispered silently, his expression softening. He quickly flipped through the documents and sat in his chair, motionless for an extended period of time. It was as though he had fallen asleep from the shadows, brought about by the light. After a few minutes, Leonard finally moved. He leaned into the chair and said in a deep voice,
Old man, do you think this detective, Sherlock Moriarty, resembles my teammate back in Tingen City, Klein Moretti?
In his mind, the aged voice said after some hesitation,
The one who joined the Nighthawks because of the Antigonus family's notebook?
Yes.
Leonard answered in a heavy voice. In his body, the parasite said after 2 seconds,
There's some resemblance.
After receiving the reply, Leonard once again fell silent. After a long while, he took out a gold pocket watch and snapped it open to determine that it was still morning. Leonard snapped the pocket watch closed and stood up, nearly overturning the stack of documents. He hurriedly reached out his hand and held onto the documents. Then he left behind a note saying that he had found certain clues and planned to head out to do some investigations, thus making it possible that he would return very late.
Let me see if someone is pretending to be Tingen City's hero, or if you've always been wearing masks. A secret organization member who sneaked into the Nighthawks. Your true motives aren't much loftier than Ince Zangwill. You were also targeting something behind Chanis Gate.
Leonard no longer had that aloof attitude as his eyes narrowed as he quickly left St. Samuel Cathedral's basement. In Hillston Borough, outside a building with quite a unique architecture. Dwayne Dantès got off his carriage and saw the building that was built in the style of the late Fourth Epoch. The building was mostly comprised of huge stone slabs, creating a total of 4 stories. The windows on each level were like a door, and it was matched with a tiny balcony. Its entire facade had been weathered by the elements, revealing a sandy yellow color. The stone columns and arches held up a refined porch that made it seem rather magnificent. This was the East Balaam Military Veterans Mess. Klein waved his cane and pointed at the building before him and said with a smile,
"It has quite a historic feel."
Member of Parliament mocked, nodded in reply.
Even though it's a building built in an ancient style, it still has more than 100 years of history.
As he spoke, he led Dwayne Dantès into the club and said to the lady at the reception,
Dwayne Dantès, unofficial member, I'll be his recommender.
With that said, he turned to the tycoon and explained,
Not only have you not served in East Balaam, but you have never participated in the wars that happened there. You don't even have a military background, so there's no way for you to be an official member. However, even being an unofficial member will allow you free entry and the use of the various facilities. You will be able to enjoy the delicious food and alcohol and get to know different friends.
That's exactly what I was hoping for.
Klein nodded with a smile. After the beautiful lady, who was of Southern Continent descent, finished the registration, Mocked added,
There's no admission fee. It's £60 a year for the membership.
With that said, he chuckled and said,
It's not expensive, even more so for you. Here, you will get to come into contact with all kinds of weapons. There are enough shooting ranges to provide you with shooting practice. You can even learn horse riding.
At a club of this level, £60 really isn't expensive. After all, generals often appear here, and they have many famous chefs. Klein didn't speak further as he took out his wallet. He counted £60 and gave it to the receptionist, obtaining a badge with the logo of a forest, ocean, and blades. As Klein wore the badge with a number on its back, he said to Mocked,
This is a place filled with glory. I'm deeply impressed with your contributions in East Balaam. If I wish to contribute to the cause, who should I look for?
Mocked pointed at the receptionist.
Just give it to her. She will jot it down and announce it on the notice board over there.
All right.
He then turned his head and made Richardson take out the £500 he had already prepared. After giving the donation, Klein passed through the beautifully decorated foyer with Mocked, arriving at a room that resembled an activity room. As for his valet, Richardson remained outside in the break room. There were snacks, tea, and coffee there. In the small room, through Mocked's introductions, Klein got to know 5 officers who were either still in service or were retired. Apart from a particular House of Commons member of Parliament, the highest-ranking epaulet was Colonel Calvin. He was presently working at the Loan Kingdom's Ministry of Defense. However, his actual position was unknown. According to what Klein knew, for quasi-high-ranking members of the military at the rank of colonel, they were mostly beyonders, mid-sequence beyonders. Mocked, Calvin and company quickly began chatting. Klein didn't interject as he seriously listened to their conversations, occasionally echoing a sentence or two. In this relaxed atmosphere, Calvin suddenly turned his head and said to Dwayne Dantès,
I heard you were often active in West Balaam.
The colonel had a long face like a donkey's, but it didn't look comical at all. His gaze was rather deep.
Yes, that place is more chaotic than East Balaam.
Calvin laughed when he heard that.
Of course. Intis made too many mistakes over there.
He paused and continued asking,
How is your relationship with the people from Intis over there?
Klein didn't understand the colonel's motive as he bit the bullet and said,
It's all right. They're all very greedy.
In fact, he didn't know a single one. He had only heard Anderson mention a few names and their corresponding matters. Calvin nodded and raised another question.
Are you familiar with the tribes over there, as well as the resistance?
I know some.
Klein answered vaguely. He only knew one Intis military leader of the resistance. It was the former Intis princess, Queen Mystic Bernadette. Calvin laughed as he took a sip from his cup of red wine. During this process, no one spoke, including Mocked. After putting down his cup, Calvin looked at Dwayne Dantès again and said,
This is the thing. Every year, we would obsolete many rifles and cannons. And directly destroying them or processing them is too much of a waste, or costs too much. It's not a good solution. I'm not sure if you're interested in buying a batch and selling it to West Balam. You can sell it to the regions ruled by Insis, selling them to the tribes and resistance. Trust me, this is definitely a very lucrative business. Of course, it's also very dangerous. If you're caught by Intis in West Balam, we will disavow you.
This is making me an arms dealer? This is one of the most lucrative businesses. Although I'm not familiar with West Balam at all, and lack any connections, I can sell it to Queen Mystic or the Resistance at the Rorstead Archipelago.
Klein was tempted as he deliberately wore a mixed and hesitant expression.
I've never done such things before, but it's definitely attractive enough.
Calvin laughed and said,
There's no need to rush to a decision. This is a very important matter that requires serious thought. Just give your answer to Mocked before the end of the week.
Klein secretly heaved a sigh of relief and nodded with a smile.
All right.
Tingen City, Raphael Cemetery. Although the afternoon sun was rather strong, this place remained gloomy and cold. Leonard was standing in front of a grave, staring silently at the tombstone. Chapter 852. Straight to the point. The sun hung brightly in midair. In a dark, silent corner of the cemetery, Leonard Mitchell suddenly raised the shovel beside him. The two mounds of soil at the side gradually raised in height as the coffin pit became obvious. From time to time there would be passers-by, but they didn't notice anything, as though a dream was happening over there. Finally, Leonard threw the shovel and bent down. He reached out and grabbed the ends of the coffin lid with both hands. Using immense strength, he pulled open the heavy wooden lid and discovered that the thick, long nails had fallen off at some point in time. There was nothing inside the pitch-black coffin. Nothing! Leonard continued keeping his body hunched as he silently watched this scene without any further movement. He stood there like a petrified statue for a very long time. In his hazy dream, Klein saw a tombstone with an epitaph. It stood silently among many other tombstones as it was dyed in crimson moonlight. This scene shattered immediately as Klein snapped awake. He confirmed that he was still Dwayne Dantès and that he was still inside 160 Beauclerk Street's master bedroom. The dream seems to be telling me something. As a seer, Klein treated every dream seriously. This was no exception. He focused and shook himself out of his state of drowsiness before attempting to make an interpretation.
That's likely a tomb. This represents a particular deceased or something related to resurrection. The crimson moonlight represents the goddess, corresponding to the Church of Evernight and the Nighthawks. If I were to directly see the moon, it might involve the primordial moon, vampire ancestor Lilith, and the mother tree of desire. The tomb was dyed with a color almost resembling blood. This symbolizes something bad.
As Klein did an interpretation of the dream, he gathered all the content and attempted to make an effective, meaningful conclusion. After some serious thought, he began to believe that the dream's revelation was referring to the past him and the Church of Evernight. After making the connections with what had happened the past few days, Klein slowly came to an answer.
As Dwayne Dantès has repeated, headed for St. Samuel Cathedral, he must have been added to a list of suspects. If Leonard hasn't left Backland, this must have garnered his attention. After all, he knows that Dwayne Dantès isn't a simple person and has mysterious origins. As an angel from the Marauder pathway, Leonard's grandpa probably discovered that the Gray Fog and the Seer pathway has intricate ties and knows that the corresponding sequence 0 is called the Fool. This way, they will naturally be able to make connections with the honorific name of the Fool that was previously spread, and they would believe that I'm a member of a secret organization that worships the Fool. In developing on this clue, it can also involve the person who killed Lenivus and Hero Bandit Black Emperor who used tarot cards. Along with the Gehrman Sparrow clues I deliberately left behind, as well as Leonard's previous investigations into Sherlock Moriarty, it's not impossible for him to put things together and find what's highly dubious. And in the beginning, Sherlock Moriarty's disguise wasn't too good. As long as Leonard investigates seriously, it wouldn't be difficult to discover that the great detective resembled his former colleague. So he went to Tingen to dig up the grave for confirmation?
As he thought about the matter, Klein pulled a back cushion over and sat up. He felt that he had already found the answer to his dream. Oxen. He began seriously analyzing what could happen afterwards, considering if he should abandon the identity of Dwayne Dantès.
Leonard has no way of conveying his theories and conclusion to the other Nighthawks because he won't be able to explain the key points for his inference. This will expose his own secret. Based on my experience and my understanding of him, he will steer the matter via different means. This will be more complicated and troublesome, wasting even more time. Before that happens, I should find him and give him another warning. It should snuff out whatever is on his mind. After all, the church didn't suffer any material loss, nor did anyone die. Yes, for Dwayne Dantès, I have taken note of the time. I specially created tracks of my activity in the southern continent over the past few months, staggering it with the decline of German sparrows sightings. And this involves the Dantès colony, so it will be rather difficult to verify the matter. That also means that Leonard has at best figured out that German sparrow equals Sherlock Moriarty equals Klein Moretti. He will just believe that I'm in cahoots with them, part of a secret organization that believes in the fool. Haha, to him, Dwayne Dantès is a powerful, mysterious beyonder who can sense the grandpa in him, a demigod. This is an obvious discrepancy with the other identities.
Klein soon came up with countermeasures as he turned his attention to the matter he encountered at East Balaam Military Veterans Mess in the afternoon.
Why would they directly seek me out for such a private arms deal? I just established a friendship with Mocht and hadn't experienced any tests. I don't deserve such trust. Perhaps it's a test. In the beginning, it will just be rifles and cannons. The quantity would probably be limited, nor will it involve high-quality items. Furthermore, I'll need to come up with the cash before receiving the goods. If I have any real problems, they wouldn't suffer any losses. They will only suffer the repercussions of a small batch of weapons falling into hands within their own domain of control. Yes, to them, a tycoon like me, with a complicated background and a deep understanding of West Balaam, really is an excellent candidate. First, I have the money. Second, I have the guts. Third, I have the resources and social connections, allowing the arms to be sold to suitable factions. Fourth, I have no background in the upper echelons of the kingdom. I can always be made the scapegoat and be abandoned. They must have sent people to monitor me in secret. As long as this business is smoothly completed, I'll be a close partner with the military. This will aid in my investigations of the truth behind the Great Smog of Backland. The problem I have now is that I have zero actual knowledge of West Balaam's resistance and various tribes. I've no idea where that fellow Anderson is. I don't have his method of contact either. Dantès might be aware of the situation in West Balaam. Same for Ma'am Hermit. Likewise for Queen Mystic, who's backing her. I'll first gather intelligence from these channels.
Having made up his mind, Klein's working brain slowed down as a sense of drowsiness washed over him again. He let his body slide down bit by bit as he got under the blankets. In the basement of St. Samuel Cathedral, Leonard, who had returned from Tingen, managed to be in time for the team's internal meeting. Soest first briefed them on the conclusion of the Archbishop and what the other local Nighthawk teams had obtained.
With the help from the Holy Cathedral, St. Anthony has confirmed that the infiltrator is German Sparrow. The conclusion is that this crazy criminal is still alive but doesn't exist in this world. This is truly a contradictory statement. I don't understand it as well. His Grace didn't explain anything either. In short, our focus will be on the investigation of German Sparrow. According to the information provided by MI9, German Sparrow is a fake identity. He originally came from Backland.
After Soest finished the briefing, he asked,
"Do you have anything to add?"
Leonard opened his mouth and was just about to say something, but his eyes shimmered twice before he fell silent again. Soest turned his head and glanced at him, calling him out by name.
"Leonard, did you discover any clues?"
Leonard remained silent for a second before shrugging.
That clue has been eliminated.
Soest didn't ask further as he looked at the other teammates. After a series of supplementary information and analysis, he began assigning missions to his Red Gloves team. After everything was assigned, Leonard Mitchell held a name list that required him to enter their dreams for a cross-check. He returned to the break room above and threw his body into bed. He sat there silently as he raised his hand to comb his hair, preparing to begin taking action. However, the first dream he entered wasn't anyone in the name list. His target was Dwayne Dantès. After repeated considerations, he decided to speak to this secret organization member, an undying monster from the Fourth Epoch, face to face. He wanted to see what information he could sound out. This looked somewhat rash, but with both parties knowing each other's secrets, it was still a good choice. 160 Boakland Street. Klein's drowsy mind suddenly became clear as he knew that someone had entered his dream. He pondered silently, sitting in a reclining chair and turning his head to look at the balcony. He saw a black-haired, green-eyed man wearing a white shirt and black vest nimbly leap inside. He was none other than Leonard Mitchell.
I haven't gone looking for you, and here you are coming to my doorstep. The other Nighthawks would politely knock on the door before entering. Only you would jump into balconies.
Klein lampooned as he looked at the poet approach him. At this moment, in Leonard's eyes, Dwayne Dantès was still wearing a formal suit in the dream. His sideburns were gray, and he had an angular face with an immense amount of charm. At this moment, the tycoon wore a smile, as though he wasn't hiding the fact that he remained lucid and that he wasn't affected by a nightmare. Klein said with a tone he believed matched Leonard's impression of him.
Didn't Palez Zoros teach you some manners?
Palez Zoroast. He's warning me again.
Leonard was taken aback as he remembered the name. He quickly reined in his thoughts and bowed in a manner that lacked standards.
Please pardon me for the intrusion. You are on our investigation list. Was the infiltration done by you guys? Is that your goal for coming to Backland?
Klein, in his Dwayne Dantès guise, raised the cup of red wine and sipped it.
No, it's not us, but just him alone.
He put on an act that he wasn't afraid of Leonard knowing. Leonard asked in a deep tone.
Gehrman Sparrow?
Klein glanced at him with his deep blue eyes that seemed to have seen the vicissitudes of life.
Isn't that obvious?
Leonard took the opportunity to ask.
What does he actually want to do? He didn't take anything away.
Klein raised his hand to stroke his white sideburns and chuckled.
What do you think is the answer?
Chapter 853. Comparison of Experience in Sophistry.
What do I think? If I were to know the answer, why would I be here? I'd have long handed this information to my superiors.
Leonard silently mumbled as he deliberated over his words. During this process, he discovered that, although he was standing straight and looking down on Dwayne Dantès, the tycoon who was sitting leisurely in the reclining chair held the aura of having the advantage. It was like a high-ranking personage casually listening to his subordinates' reports. This made Leonard feel a little uneasy. He subconsciously surveyed the area and pulled a chair over as he leaned back into it, half out of habit and half as a deliberate action.
I believe he or all of you are searching for something. Back in Tingen, he infiltrated the Nighthawks to search for something. In Backland, he also infiltrated Shannis Gate to search for that item. His search was fruitless the first time, so he escaped by feigning death by using Ince Zangwill's assault. He still failed to find it the second time. Hence, he didn't take anything and directly left Shannis Gate.
While speaking, Leonard used a very certain tone to divulge that he had figured out that Gehrman Sparrow was Sherlock Moriarty and also Klein Moretti. He wished to use the effect of pressure to make Dwayne Dantès not appear that calm or have any thoughts of resorting to sophistry.
Indeed, he went to dig my grave.
Klein sighed inwardly as he chuckled. He picked up the glass of red wine and gently swirled it.
Do you think that we would consecutively make 2 rash attempts before having any confirmed intelligence? You should know that such matters can only be done once. Once there's a failure, there's no way it can succeed again. Therefore, who would use an operation to verify one's guess when the target isn't clear?
He has tacitly confirmed my explanation. Klein Moretti is Gehrman Sparrow, Hero Bandit Black Emperor, a member of the secret organization who believes in the Fool.
Leonard tried hard not to frown, as he crossed his right leg and said,
So it's not that nothing was found, but that there was a failure due to other factors? During these two attempts, Tingen City's St. Selena Cathedral and Backland's St. Samuel Cathedral only shared two common items: sealed artifact 2049 and the Antigonus family's notebook. Antigonus family's notebook. That's it? Klein Moretti joined the Nighthawks because of it?
Although the process of inference is wrong, the answer is actually correct. Klein chuckled and said,
Our brains aren't there just for show. If his goal was the Antigonus family's notebook, there was no need for him to join the Nighthawks. Before you obtained it, he had plenty of opportunities, and even after you obtained it, he had no lack of opportunities to obtain it. You should understand the situation back then better than I do. Also, since the target was the Antigonus family's notebook, why didn't he take it away?
Upon being mocked by Dwayne Dantès, Leonard Mitchell realized that the theory he came up with on the spot was filled with logical contradictions. He felt ashamed as he showed some anger. He slowly took a deep breath and said, in midjai ator ahais.
Then why would he infiltrate Channis Gate using two different methods? And not only didn't he take something away, but he didn't even leave anything behind. He even entered a strange state.
Just as Leonard said that, he saw Dwayne Dantès with his gray sideburns produce a deep, profound smile.
I'm not sure of the reason for the latter matters. Perhaps you should ask the Evernight Goddess.
Goddess. What does he mean?
Leonard instantly felt alarmed and puzzled. He found it unimaginable as to what had happened behind St. Samuel Cathedral's Channis Gate. Right on the heels of that, he heard Dwayne Dantès say, with a deep laugh,
As for your first question, I believe you are mistaken about something. Our organization's members come from different places and join for different reasons, choosing to change their own faith in the process. As for what happened before that, their lives remain their own. Just like me, I had a past and have a present as well. The reason why I came here is because of the last name I gave myself.
Dantès. The return of the Count. He joined the secret organization that worships the fool for revenge and came to Backland?
Leonard nodded in thought. Klein paused for a few seconds as he casually sipped the red wine and wore a smile. He continued.
Similarly, he who was resurrected because of the Antigonus family's notebook's curse does it for vengeance as well.
Klein had deliberately mentioned his present last name, Dantès, and mentioned revenge. It was to preemptively distinguish himself from Gehrman Sparrow and Klein Moretti. It was to prevent Leonard from later finding similar objectives between the two and begin making a deeper connection from the similarities. By personally mentioning it, it framed the listener's thought processes and made them subconsciously follow the logic of the content, thus treating Dwayne Dantès and Klein Moretti as two completely different people. The only similarity was their thoughts of revenge. And in this world, there weren't only two Avengers. Leonard lowered his crossed right leg unknowingly as he leaned forward.
Vengeance? Who does he wish to seek revenge on?
After asking the question, the elegant and handsome middle-aged gentleman curled the corners of his lips.
Lenevis and Inci Zangwill.
Ince Zangwill.
Leonard blurted out as he couldn't help but have his expression repeatedly change. Finally, he fell silent. His green eyes looked ahead, unfocused. His thoughts a mystery. How? Phew! After a long silence, Leonard exhaled and released his originally clenched hands. He asked with his voice a little hoarse.
Lenevis was really killed by him?
Of course.
Klein secretly sighed as he replied calmly. Leonard's mouth gaped open as though he wished to say something, but he didn't. He tightly pursed his lips. Realizing that his goals had been met, he immediately changed topics and chuckled.
If you have a similar goal or require help, you can also chant his honorific name. Perhaps you will receive a response.
He. That secret existence? The fool?
Leonard imagined that Dwayne Dantès was habitually proselytizing and attempting to develop the secret organization. Therefore, He didn't think further and replied with silence. Klein then laughed.
By the way, help me pass a message to Palais Zoroast. One of our organization's members encountered blasphemer Amon in the Forsaken Land of the Gods.
This piece of information contained massive amounts of information, so much that Leonard was temporarily at a loss for a response. His mind kept reverberating with the relevant information.
The Forsaken Land of the Gods? The Forsaken Land of the Gods that even the 7 churches are unable to find? Their secret organization actually has members who can enter the Forsaken Land of the Gods? Blasphemer Amon. Old man told me that he's hiding from a high-sequence beyonder with the last name Amon. He was heavily injured by Amon and had no choice but to parasitize me. Dwayne Dantès' tone and attitude really is like an undying monster who lived from the 4th epoch. He's also at the same or a similar level as Old Man. In front of him, I really don't feel any sense of superiority. I even feel like I'm lacking confidence.
As his thoughts ran through his head, Leonard forced himself to focus.
I'll pass on the message to him.
Based on the circumstances after Leonard enters the dreams of others, it can be determined that the grandpa doesn't completely control his senses. Otherwise, he would definitely have an abnormal reaction when he hears the name Blasphemer Amon. Previously, Will Septon's words also corroborates this point. Only when my dear poet encounters true danger would the grandpa sense it and take action. Very good. He isn't a full parasite.
As Klein interpreted the unspoken information, he smiled.
You may leave. You can also relax. My goal isn't the Church of Evernight. Slay. My coming goals, not the ones of the past.
Klein silently added inwardly. Leonard had already received enough information. Thus, he didn't dare overstay his welcome. He got up and bowed. Then, he left Dwayne Dantès' dream. In a room on the back streets of St. Samuel Cathedral, Leonard woke up and heard the aged voice from the parasite in him echo in his mind.
What did he say?
Leonard deliberated over his words and said,
He directly admitted to being a member of that secret organization that believes in the fool. Likewise for Klein Moretti, whose alias is Gehrman Sparrow. Their goal is for vengeance. Their own vengeance.
Palais Zoroast fell silent for a second before saying,
Did he say how Klein Moretti could be resurrected? Or how did he fake his death to such an extent?
Leonard recalled and said,
The explanation he gave was a curse from the Antigonus family's notebook. Curse.
At this point, Leonard discovered that Dwayne Dantès' choice of words was rather strange. He had described the power of resurrecting the dead as a curse. Palais Zoroast didn't seem to have any questions about that. After a few seconds of silence, he said,
What else did he say?
Leonard didn't hide it from him and said frankly,
He mentioned blasphemer Amon, saying that a member of their organization met him in the Forsaken Land of the Gods. Old man, is that the Amon you mentioned?
The aged voice replied after a while.
Probably.
He paused for a moment before saying,
I believe that Dwayne Dantès, no, the fool that's backing him, might be some old friend of mine.
Old man believes that he's at a higher level than Dwayne Dantès. Or even higher. He's a grounded angel?
Leonard thought and asked.
Which old friend?
Palais Zoroast didn't answer as he asked,
Are you going to find an opportunity to reveal the situation about Dwayne Dantès and Klein Moretti?
Leonard suddenly fell silent and only heavily said more than 10 seconds later,
Not for now. Perhaps he and I and them have the chance of working together. And the church didn't suffer any material loss this time.
The parasite inside him didn't say a word, as though he had fallen asleep. Leonard slowly looked up and read the information in front of him. His eyes turned dark as he muttered,
He's overtaken me by leaps and bounds.
Chapter 854, Confession. Early morning, 160 Boakland Street. After Klein got out of bed and washed up, he didn't rush to leave the bathroom. He took 4 steps counterclockwise and headed above the gray fog. He then conjured the world Gehrman Sparrow and made the fake person pray piously.
Honorable Mr. Fool, please pass on the message to Dantès. I need him to provide me information on West Balaam. It's best if he includes his social connections. Also, get him to be careful of the Church of Evernight for the time being.
Above the Golden Dream, Dantès, who saw the sun earlier than Backlund, was holding a cup of malt beer as he sat in the shadows, hiding away from the vile sunlight.
Lessons will begin in another 15 minutes. Captain said that a treasure hunter must have a sufficiently good grasp of mathematics. Sigh, this is really such a headache. But it's also something to look forward to. Dogsh Astra T.
Dantès placed one hand on his knee as he downed a mouthful of beer. At this moment, the gray fog emanated in front of him. The blurry figure that looked down from above appeared as Dantès' ears resounded with Gehrman Sparrow's voice.
Information on West Balaam? Although we've been there to search for lost ancient treasure and got to know a few tribal natives, that is pretty much it. There won't be much that I can tell him about. This is so troublesome. I'll have to do all sorts of work again. Why does Gehrman Sparrow get involved in so many things?
Dantès silently grumbled as he vigilantly glanced to his sides, afraid that the madman would suddenly appear. He drew a breath upon considering how he wanted to become stronger. He didn't wish to be of no help when his captain met with danger, having to shamefully hide at the back. Dantès slapped his face a few times with his free hand before standing up. He immediately left the shadows and found Iron Skin and Barrel. He asked them in detail about West Balaam's situation and who he should ask for the various matters, only to obtain a unanimous answer. Captain Edwina Edwards, or Anderson Hood, who previously joined our bonfire on the ship.
Will she be suspicious if I directly ask Captain, making her believe that I have a secret and am secretly working for someone else? But I've no idea where that fellow Anderson has gone to. Dogsh Asterisk T!
Dantès fell into a dilemma as he couldn't help but think about something else, recalling Gehrman Sparrow's last words.
Be careful of the Church of Evernight.
Dantès wasn't a fool. He knew that a matter that the crazy adventurer emphasized was something important. It also meant that he believed that he had a high chance of being an important target of the Church of Evernight. He would be wildly pursued by the Red Gloves. Apart from the Church of Evernight, the Church of Storms and the military are targeting me as well. It's said that they have each sent a squad.
Dantès thought as his heart palpitated. He soon revealed a puzzled and bitter look as he muttered to himself.
But I haven't done anything.
After passing the message about gathering information on West Balaam to Admiral of Stars Cattleya, Klein left the area above the gray fog and returned to the real world. Like every other day, he had his breakfast and had lessons. After he woke up from his afternoon nap with Richardson's help, he changed into a formal suit for an excursion. He got into the carriage that had already been waiting for him at the door.
Head to St. Samuel Cathedral.
Klein leaned on the carriage wall as he instructed the carriage driver.
He had decided to continue maintaining his identity as Dwayne Dantès. He believed that it was best if he didn't change his former persona. Therefore, he couldn't change the frequency of his trips to St. Samuel Cathedral. Nor could he donate less. Besides, this can effectively wipe away any suspicion they have of me. After all, it's hard to imagine that the criminal who infiltrated Chanis Gate hadn't stayed behind, but would saunter into the cathedral as though nothing had happened. I'll have to thank Emperor Roselle for not plagiarizing criminal psychology. He didn't point out that intelligent criminals often return to their crime scene to admire their work and the helpless response of others.
Klein mumbled inwardly as he took a sip of the black tea that Richardson had brewed. After moistening his throat, he glanced at his valet and asked, seemingly casually,
"What is your deepest impression of East and West Balaam?"
Sitting beside him, Richardson didn't ask why. After some thought, he said,
East Balaam is safer. West Balaam is more chaotic.
After giving a simple answer, Richardson turned to look at his employer, only to see Dwayne Dantès with his eyes half closed, as though he wanted him to continue. Richardson scratched his ear and deliberated over his words.
There's also poverty, hunger, and whip abuse. People from East and West Balaam originally worshipped death. Later, due to the perks of believing in the deities like the goddess, Lord of Storms, and the eternal blazing sun, allowing them to boost their statuses and receive protection from the cathedral. There was a large-scale change of faith. However, as the number of believers increased, that special status was quickly removed. The people of the lower class began worshiping death again in secret. It's more obvious for the more messy West Balaam in regards to this point. The descendants of death often receive a great deal of support. This is what my father of mine occasionally mentions after he's drunk.
Klein listened in silence and didn't stop his valet's recount, nor did he probe deeper. Soon the carriage arrived outside St. Samuel Cathedral. Klein first took in the sight of the white flying pigeons before entering the prayer hall. He took off his hat and handed it together with his cane to Richardson. He randomly found a seat and looked at the altar in the darkness. He watched the stars and the dark sacred emblem as unease, embarrassment, and a lack of confidence arose in him.
If he had guessed correctly, ever since he made contact with the Holy Sword and made a vow, the goddess had likely taken notice of him. Every time he entered the cathedral to pretend like he was praying, it had the feeling like the emperor's new clothes. I wonder what the goddess's opinion on this is, and what position is the church taking? I'll probe first.
Klein clasped his hands and held it to his nose, looking as though he was praying seriously. After about 8 minutes, he slowly got up, walked to the donation box, took out £50 and piously threw it in. After doing that, Klein turned to the confessional along the sides of the hall and entered. Unlike most ancient confessionals, which were big wooden crates with 2 doors, the modern confessional was an independent, spacious compartment. The confessor and the listening bishop were separated by a wooden partition, with each one of them having their seats. Using the dim light, Klein sat on the chair and listened to the bishop say with his mellow voice,
"Do you have something you would like to say? The goddess cares about all her believers."
Klein raised his right hand and tapped his chest 4 times in a clockwise fashion.
Praise the lady. I wish to confess that 2 days ago, the military came to me, wishing that I can sell a batch of firearms and cannons to West Balaam to add coal to the chaos there.
After he said that, the bishop on the other side didn't immediately give him an answer, as though he was alarmed by the arms dealing. He was momentarily unsure as to how to organize his words. The confessional instantly ended up being wrapped in an awkward silence.
You became frightened just from that? Have you never encountered a confessor as frank as me? If I were to say that I'm currently plotting the murder of a demigod while hiding from the mother tree of desire and the true creator, wouldn't you be jumping up?
Klein lampooned as he continued.
I did enjoy the adventurer's life when I was young. I obtained my wealth through metal, blood, and fire. But I'm already sick of that life. I only wish for a peaceful future. I originally wanted to decline the offer, but I'm unable to overcome the greed in my heart. This is a sufficiently enticing business, and it helps me in obtaining a firm footing in Backland's high society. I confess that I ultimately chose the bustle and chaos.
The bishop on the other side finally had a response as he said with a gentle voice,
Don't be afraid. Don't waver. You don't have to feel guilt for a certain level of greed, as long as you don't harm the innocent or commit any of the crimes as written in the Bible. Go, follow your inner heart and make the choice you wish to make the most. Only this way can you truly understand the teachings and understand the truth of those words. There's no need to be put in a difficult position. Remember this, no matter what you do, sincerely being contrite and penitent is worthy of praise and forgiveness. May the goddess bless you.
Praise the lady.
Klein drew the crimson moon once again on his chest. His visit to St. Samuel Cathedral was to use the opportunity of a confession to inform the church of his intentions of engaging in arms dealing. He wanted to know their reaction, so as to pry into the goddess's attitude towards him. Without saying anything extra, Klein slowly got up and left the confessional. He walked down the aisle and went towards his valet, Richardson. At this moment, he saw a lady sitting in the corner of the prayer hall. She was wearing a hooded black robe, with blue eyeshadow and blush. She had quite an uncanny sense of beauty. She was none other than spirit medium Daly Simone. Daly looked up and similarly noticed Dwayne Dantès. Her expression momentarily turned adrift, as though she had fallen asleep while praying and had entered a dream. Klein nodded at her indiscernibly as a polite gesture. Then, he took his hat and cane from Richardson as he unhurriedly walked out of the hall. Daly retracted her gaze as she looked down at the pew in front of her before slowly closing her eyes. Walking out St. Samuel Cathedral, Klein stood by the side of the staircase and paused for 2 seconds. The white pigeons suddenly flew up in the square up ahead, blocking the sights of all who were taking in the scene. Less than 30 minutes later, in the basement, Leonard heard that Dwayne Dantès, who had previously been investigated, was about to cooperate with the officials. He was going to be a merchant who would sell arms to West Balaam.
What is he trying to do?
Leonard frowned, little by little, completely at a loss as to what the undying monster's thoughts were. Chapter 855, New Visitor. As he returned from St. Samuel Cathedral to 160 Bauckland Street, Klein saw his white-gloved butler, Walter, walk up to him.
Sir, someone delivered a name card. He said that his employer wishes to visit you from 4 to 5.
Walter said with a staid expression. Klein tried figuring out who the visitor was, but he had no clue. He nodded gently and said,
Who's his employer?
Walter darted his gaze around and saw that the other servants were rather far away. He then replied,
Baron Sindris.
Baron Sindris. That millionaire tycoon who obtained his aristocratic title with the help of the Conservative Party and Duke Negan, and is also one of the most famous bankers and entrepreneurs in the kingdom? I previously helped Ma'am Mary purchase the coin company shares. The competitor happens to be him and his friends. He's visiting me personally for that matter. It's only a transaction worth about £13,000. It shouldn't be something that requires him to go this far.
As Klein's mind raced, he walked to the staircase that led to the second floor. Walter walked half a step behind him as he said,
Sir, if you don't wish to meet Baron Sindris, I'll inform him that you got caught up at St. Samuel Cathedral, listening to the bishop's preachings, and might return very late.
In between the lines, the butler was saying that Baron Sindris was a believer of the Lord of Storms. It was impossible for him to head directly to St. Samuel Cathedral to seek him out. Klein thought and smiled before gently saying,
This is a noble who has immense influence in the banking industry. I'll definitely come across him in the future, so I have to meet him. Arrange the meeting to be at the small living room on the second floor where there's the most sunlight.
According to what Klein knew, Baron Sindris was the third largest shareholder of Bauckland Bank and the largest shareholder of Southville People's Bank. In Lowen Kingdom's banking industry, he was definitely one of the few people with the greatest influence.
Yes, sir.
Walter didn't nag on. At 4:10, Klein met the visitor, who often appeared on the papers, in the predetermined living room. The only thing that was different and deviated from his expectations was that Bauckland turned cloudy after 3. The weather had turned dark and began drizzling. It didn't bring in the bright and warm sunshine. Baron Sindris was identical to how he looked on the papers. He had black hair mixed with some white hair that was neatly combed backward, revealing his broad forehead and receding hairline. His face was rather round, but it lacked the flesh needed to support it. His cheekbones were rather high, and his wrinkles were obvious. Unlike most Lowenese his age, Baron Sindris didn't have any facial hair. He was clean-shaven, and his light blue eyes were nearly colorless. Beside him were a valet and bodyguard. They were the kind of people that didn't attract much attention. The former's greatest characteristic was his thin hair, while the latter had short hair if you didn't count the thick beard that reached down from his ears.
Good afternoon, Lord Sindris. It's my honor to have you here as my guest.
Klein held his hand to his chest as he bowed. Usually, a host would mostly lean their bodies forward and reach out their right hand for a handshake when greeting a guest, but at this moment he was in front of a noble, thus requiring him to be more courteous. Baron Sindris nodded gently as he smiled in response.
You're being polite. I should have visited you a long time ago, Dwayne Dantès, an experienced gentleman who knows much about the southern continent.
After exchanging some pleasantries, the two took their seats while the valets and bodyguards settled by the side. Klein was just about to say something when Baron Sindris said with a genial tone,
Dantès, I'm really impressed with people like you. Not everyone can obtain riches from the chaos in the southern continent. This requires plenty of guts and the courage to face adversity, as well as stunning judgment. Back when I was facing bankruptcy, I had entertained the idea of starting anew in the southern continent, but unfortunately, I'm not a brave man.
Although Baron Sindris later became a noble, he wasn't a commoner in the true sense of the word. His great-grandfather and grandfather had benefited from the development of the colonies, earning them plenty of money from the sea trade. They were rather successful merchants. As for his father, he had invested in industries, building up his reputation and acquiring several factories. When it came to his generation, he blitzed into the developing banking industry with his sizable wealth, becoming one of the earliest millionaires in Loen. During this process, Baron Sindris had suffered 3 failures, but he overcame them, one after another. The most harrowing incident was when the Southville People's Bank he founded suffered from a reputation crisis. A bank run happened, nearly bankrupting him.
He keeps chatting about my experiences in the southern continent. Is he hinting to me that he has already discovered the problems with my background and is using it as a warning? Heh, he probably never expected that the southern continent experience he keeps repeating is all fake.
Klein scoffed inwardly, but he replied while looking absolutely normal.
That isn't courage, but rashness. Most people who head to the southern continent do have the spirit of adventure, but that's all they have.
Without waiting for Baron Sindris to continue, he smiled and said,
I nearly hired Mr. Reebach some time ago as my butler. He said that you were an excellent employer.
Baron Sindris listened in silence before sighing.
That is something that fills me with regret. Back then, I was very sincere in hoping that Reebach could continue being my butler, but he couldn't overcome the conflict within our positions.
Upon saying that, Sindris looked at the handsome and elegant Dwayne Dantès, picked up the black tea that had been served by a servant, and took a sip.
I also sincerely hope that we can be friends. I hope you can transfer the coin company's 3% to me. I will give you an offer you can't resist.
Here it comes. But I have a contract with Ma'am Mary.
Klein fell silent for 2 seconds and said with a smiling sigh,
I deeply value my trustworthiness.
Upon hearing such an answer, Sindris didn't show any obvious anger. He smiled, curious and surprised.
Aren't you going to listen to my offer?
Klein deliberately spread out his hands with a wry smile.
I'm afraid I will find it irresistible.
Ha ha.
Sindris immediately laughed and slowly stood up.
You're as humorous as they say. At the same time, you have a firm will that the rumors fail to mention.
He looked at his bodyguard and valet before saying to Dwayne Dantès with a smile,
Being a partner with you is definitely better than being a competitor. All right, it's time that I leave. There are many things that require my attention.
Is this sincere praise or a veiled threat?
Klein wasn't a spectator, so he wasn't able to interpret the subtleties. All he could do was shamelessly reply,
Likewise. I look forward to having the opportunity to cooperate with you in other domains, Lord Sindris.
Dressed in a formal suit and a tie, Baron Sindris smiled and nodded. Without saying another word, he was led out of the main door by Dwayne Dantès and his butler and valet. As he watched the luxurious carriage disappear into the distance, Butler Walters suddenly said,
Sir, should I hire some temporary bodyguards?
Ah? Klein nearly failed to understand his butler. Seeing his employer's expression remain unperturbed, Walter added,
At times, competition in business can endanger one's personal safety.
Mr. Butler also noticed the veiled threats by Baron Sindris?
Klein curled the corners of his lips and said,
I'm not too worried because this is Backland. Z. Because my name is known at the Church of Evernight. Because I'm about to cooperate with the military. Therefore, I'm not afraid of suffering any form of retaliation in the Beyonder domain, and I'm not afraid that matters will develop like with the Intis ambassador. Besides, Baron Sindris is a successful man with status and power. He won't be that rash.
Klein thought inwardly. When Walter attempted to continue, Klein chuckled and said,
However, being careful is forever a good habit. You can hire 2 bodyguards. Let them secretly provide me with protection. Try to not have them be discovered by the servants at home.
Yes, sir.
Walter immediately replied. Klein thought for a moment and said,
Make a trip to Member of Parliament Mock's place. Invite him to dinner at the Intis Srenzo restaurant tomorrow, along with his wife and daughter. If they have a prior commitment, we can postpone it to another day.
He planned on informing Mock that he planned on taking the military's test and completing the small arms deal. The most convenient method was to visit Mock at his residence and mention it in passing. But, considering how there might be a demigod of the marauder pathway around Hazel, any close contact might result in the aura of the gray fog on him being detected. Therefore, Klein changed his plans and decided to have the venue to be at a restaurant. This way, based on his judgment, the demigod which had failed to parasitize Hazel was unlikely to accompany her. Shio hid in the shadows of the woods as she watched a brown carriage slowly drive past and turn into a particular street in Empress Borough. There was an obvious coat of arms on the carriage. It was mainly a flower and 2 rings. They belonged to the captain of the Lowen Kingdom's royal guards, Viscount Stratford. Realizing that she had made 0 discoveries, she gloomily left her hiding spot and took a nearby public carriage. She returned straight to the Backland Bridge area and walked into East Borough. Upon coming to the Darby Street's bar, Shio easily walked to the bar counter as the drunkards avoided her. She directly asked the bartender who was wiping a cup,
Any new jobs?
The bartender immediately smiled.
Yes. Butler Walter, who previously offered a 200-pound bounty for a few cheats, has offered a new job. It's very simple. Secretly protect his employer for a few days. The payment will be discussed face-to-face. It will definitely be a handsome reward. He was very pleased with your efficiency during the last mission. He requested that we give you priority. How about it? Are you interested?
Gio had a rather deep impression of the butler and his employer because they had spent 200 pounds to seek out cheats who had only scammed 1,000 pounds of cloth.
Very generous, and he's quick to pay.
Gio did a slight recall before nodding and saying,
All right,